call to order as a verification of the quorum, of which we have. The second item on the agenda is a Pledge of Allegiance. Would someone like to lead the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay,
I'll start.
there you go, Peter. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
The flag of
of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
For all. Thanks, everybody. The third item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. These are the meeting minutes from the November 20th, 2023 Weston Board of Education regular meeting. And then that's the first item on this agenda. Has everyone reviewed them? Are there any changes that anyone would like to make? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes for the November 2023, Board of Education meeting? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion. I move to approve the meeting notes from the November 20th, 2023 Western Board of Education regular meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
There we go. Thank you very much. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Second item is the meeting minutes from the December 4th, 2023 Western Board of Education special meeting.
Model, I'll make a motion to move the meeting notes, to approve the meeting notes from the December 4th, 2023 Western Board of Education special meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The fourth item on the agenda is a Student Board of Education representative comments. Who do we have here tonight?
Hi, it's Nivea and Gianna. We're back. So we just have some
Hi.
updates for you guys. So first things first, with some student government updates. Last week, Friday, we had a pajama day, and this went along with raising money for the Connecticut's Children's Hospital. We raised $250. It was really cool. People got really into it. And next, we also had a food drive that the freshmen organized. We're really proud of them for that. So we had advisories compete to donate the most food, and the advisory that won, which was actually my advisory, we got to carry the food out to the person-to-person reps' cars. And this week we also have our Spirit Week, which we have dress ups every day this week. So like today was PJ Day, and then Friday we have an ugly sweater day. And that, we're really excited for that. And also on Wednesday, we have our annual X period, which is basically a 45, or I'm not entirely sure, but around the 45-minute period during our advisory class where students kind of get to choose different activities they could participate in. So for example, we have writing letters to the elderly, we have wrapping gifts for a toy drive, we have dog training, and something with caroling and music. So that's just a fun week for us that we have ahead, and we're really excited for. Additionally, winter sports also started. So that's something. We get to go to the sports games now and get excited for some school spirit.
Other things we have coming up, we have Candy Grams, which the juniors did to raise money. And that's just basically selling candy canes that we then give out to students that bought them, and it just raises school spirit. Also recently we had caroling, which Tri-M did, which was really fun. I did it because I'm in Tri-M, and we basically went around classes and we sang carols to students that bought them, and all the funds went to fundraising for Tri-M, which was really good. We made a lot of money and it was really fun. Another thing, the chamber singers recently caroled at Le Chat, and we caroled with the WIS students that are in choir and the Weston Middle School Chamber. And it was really fun just like doing a sing along with them because they're so young and they look up to us. So it just brought everyone together, and everyone there loved our music that we did for them too. We also recently had band and choir concerts that really went very well. we had a piece that we did with the orchestra, the choir and orchestra did together, and it went really well. Everyone loved listening to it. It was really engaging, which was really cool to do because we haven't done that in the past. And 2 weeks ago on Friday, student government members went to a leadership conference, which basically used to be a tradition, I think, but it since COVID, it hadn't happened in a while. And Gianna and I went and we really enjoyed it. We were able to network with a lot of other leaders from other schools. And it was a really cool experience because we went to different classes in the college, and we were able to learn from different professors about finance. And specifically, we had a lesson on how to introduce yourself properly, which was really informative because in general, when you introduce yourself, you're usually like, hi, like, I'm Nivi, I'm a senior, and I go to Weston High School. And that's a traditional way to introduce yourself, but the best way to really inform people about who you are as a person is by being like, hi, I'm Nivi. I am really interested in raising school spirit at my school, and I'm involved in a lot of different activities. So basically, we learned how to be more specific in our approach. And from that, just in general, we've been introducing ourselves a lot better and more charismatic when we're talking to people. So it was really cool to do that at conference. And yeah, that's everything. Yeah. Thank you.
That's terrific. Any questions? Are you looking forward to vacation?
Yes.
Yeah, we're definitely really excited for vacation. And also this week is just a fun week for us
So fun.
with Spirit Days. So
Everyone gets really into it. So it's so fun.
Well, I happened to be at the Lashad event. It was terrific. It was
Oh,
really
that's
great.
Great to hear. It was so much fun.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Have a good holiday.
You as
Um,
well.
too.
The next item on the agenda, item number 5, is public comment. I'd just like to make just a quick comment about public comment. We encourage public comment, but I think everyone should recognize that we don't engage in conversations with whomever's making those comments. We take your comments and consider them, but we don't engage in a back and forth during this part of the meeting. I do want to point out that the first item under new business, item number 7, will be a review of Weston Public Schools safety and security. It'll be a winter update, which will include Chief Henyon, Captain Burdacki of the Weston Police Department, and Joe Rios, who is the Director of School Security, who joined us from the Norwalk Public Schools, where he had a similar position after a long career, 26 years, I believe, Joe. I think that was the number, in the Newtown Police Department, where he retired as a captain in the Newtown Police Force, joining the Norwalk Public School System, well known to both Chief Henyon and Captain Burdacki. So with that, Dan, is there anyone who is on the line?
Yep, so I'd just like to go over it again for anybody who is attending. If you would like to speak during public comment, if you look at the bottom of Zoom, there's a little icon that says raise hand. Just click on that button and Ms. Saketa will call your name, will prompt you to speak. You'll get a little pop-up to say, do you want to speak or get promoted? And at which point you can state your name and your address and move forward with your public comment.
Okay. The first person that I'm going to promote is Vinny. Vinny, since you don't have your last name listed on your Zoom account, when I promote you, please state your name, your address, and turn your camera on, please. Okay, Vinny, you're now a panelist. You can speak. You'll have 5 minutes. Thank
I
you.
appreciate it. I won't take you. First of all, I just want to appreciate and thank you guys for reaching out when,
Could you,
Um,
before you go on, could you just state your full name and your address, please?
sure.
Thank you.
Vinny Perna, last Perna. I'm at 30 Oak Lane in Weston.
Thank you.
I have a third grader at Wiss, first grader at Hurlbutt, and the third one's not in the public school system yet, so she doesn't really matter. He will be. But I appreciate you just at least hearing me out, and I totally get the non back and forth, so I'll make it concise and air it out. I've never intended really to be on any of these calls, and the reasons that I am is because I think, like a lot of other parents that I've talked to, we had just always assumed that there was, and wrongly or rightly, whatever it was, that to be honest, that and I know it's not a personnel issue, that Mr. Fisher was armed, and speaking of parents in other towns around here, given, recent situations, just assume that that was the case. And maybe it's a fault of the parents not being as questioning, or a fault of wherever the other side is not presenting it to us. But along the way, there was some miscommunication, I think, and just misalignment of understanding of what the actual situation was. So I think there are some issues that need to be addressed. An armed guard for, and I understand that the two middle school and high schools are the ones that are the most vulnerable or not. And from talking to people that have kids in both those grades, both those schools, given everything that's happened, I don't understand why it wouldn't be a given. And I think it's something that we need to look deeper into and seriously consider. And I don't know what that looks like in terms of a vote or a discussion of this, but I think just in general needs to be some greater transparency on opening up a communication between parents who kids could potentially be the next headline on CNN, and parents who might have a different opinion, and whatever that is, that's fine. But I just think we need to get it out there. And for example, on maybe the survey, not do your kids feel safe, but do parents want an armed guard? And I think you get a different answer and a different reaction from how are our kids, facing this. Our kids, like parents, like I said, anticipate they're walking into school. That's a safe place to be. And I feel like I let my guard down by not asking more questions and being more involved, I guess, and finding out the true facts. So I think it just needs to be presented in a more transparent manner. And again, no back and forth, just purely my personal opinion. I would feel a lot better if my 8-year-old and my 6-year-old, if God forbid somebody gets into that door, there's already somebody inside that knows how to defend my children. And we don't have to rely on a police department, because all that does is set up somebody who now needs to get in and formulate a different plan. So I just wanted to raise that point. I understand there are a lot of intricacies, difference of opinions, this and that, but I think the conversation needs to be raised. Just talking to peers of mine, and so just kind of leave it at that. But I'd really like just to at least continue the conversation, and I don't want it to be combative by any means. I just want to put it out there for public consumption. So I'll kind of leave it there, guys. I appreciate it again. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you. Jody?
Okay, let me just move Mr. Perna back to an attendee.
No, nobody needs to see me anymore.
Removed. So, okay, is there anybody else that would like to speak? Please raise your hand. Okay, Whitney Levin, I'm going to promote you to a panelist. When you do, please state your full name and your address and turn your camera on. You will have 5 minutes to speak. Whitney, whenever you're ready. Whitney, I don't know if you can hear me, but you're still on mute.
Unmute.
There you go. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, I'm just trying to start my video. Okay, hi, sorry. I'm Whitney Levin. I live at 75 Steep Hill Road. I'm a parent with a child at Wetson Intermediate in Hurlbut. The reason I'm addressing the board today is because of the resignation of James Fisher and the subsequent hole in school security that his departure highlights. Many parents, myself included, felt safe dropping their children off at school because of the reassuring presence of Mr. Fisher. I always told my boys that if they ever had a problem at school or something was wrong, to go to Mr. Fisher, and then he would know what to do. My children trusted him, and I trusted him to keep them safe. He was a capable, respected, and trusted face of our elementary school. He was the first person parents see when they drop off their child on their very first day of school and the last person you interact with on your child's last day at Hurlbut. His sudden departure left many questions in our community about how a beloved and universally respected community member could be treated so callously by the school district. I would like the board to provide some transparency on the following. Why were parents not notified for several days following Mr. Fisher's departure? Was Mr. Fisher placed on administrative leave before his departure? And if so, what was the cause? I would like to know why there was not more expressions of gratitude for a valued security officer who gave 11 years of safety and service to the children of this town. I want to know how the school has handled the transition with our children. How will they know who to seek out and who to listen to in an emergency situation? And I think there should be more transparency on what, if any, security upgrades have been made in our district, as so far as the really visible one has been a negative one. I just can't understand what could have occurred to lose such a huge security asset in the midst of when this district is supposed to be making positive safety changes to our schools. Security changes that took place over the summer and this fall were supposed to be supplemental, not supplant an existing component of our elementary school security that everyone trusted and valued. In short, I think a lot of us are very disappointed with how this was handled, and there has been no real explanation or transparency. It's such a shame and a tremendous loss for our children and the community of this town. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Whitney.
Let me move you back. Okay. The next individual I have is Christina. I'm going to promote you to a panelist. When I do, please state your full name and your address and turn your camera on, please. When you're ready, you'll have 5 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. I apologize. I'm hiding in a dark corner of my house away from my 3 children. My name is Christina Kother, and I live at 64 Steep Hill Road. I have a kindergartner, a first grader, and a third grader. I last spoke at the Board of Education meeting in April, and I am still deeply concerned about my children's safety in our school system. Since our last conversations, we have not made enough progress. In April, we listened to Captain Burdacki go through the list of things he believed the school needed. As far as I'm aware, only one thing on that list has happened since then. Why not more? What's the timeline? Who's managing it? And who do we need to hold accountable? This month, Hurlbut lost Mr. Fisher. The witnessed gaps in security by myself and others these last few weeks are not surprising, but they are more than upsetting. I reported each one of them, and each time with a phone call of reassurance from Mrs. Barbiero or Mr. Rios, which I truly appreciate, but I am tired of reassuring phone calls. I want to see action. I am specifically asking for the following. An immediate security audit done by a professional outside agency with deep expertise on school security K through 12. Number two, immediate implementation of the security request from Captain Berdacki, such as playground security and a bulletproof front partition for our security officer at HES. Number three, implementation of armed SROs in our 2 lower schools to mirror measures taken by our surrounding towns. And number four, increased transparency and partnership from our district and Board of Education. The resignation of Mr. Fisher was handled very poorly as it relates to both the security of our children and their social and emotional well-being. And I will add that I am disappointed that we are making these comments before hearing the updates from you all. It puts us in a very difficult and unproductive situation where we're here talking at you and then we're forced to listen in silence to what you have to say, only to come back a month later to talk to you again and then forced to listen in silence again. It is not productive. It is not collaborative. It is disappointing. And I feel like you all are operating the Board of Ed is operating in a bit of a silo with very few ears on the ground, and the leadership from the top. I sincerely question your genuine responsibility to the children in our town. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who is an attendee right now that would like to speak? Please raise your hand. I am going to promote Jennifer. Jennifer, when you get promoted to a panelist, please turn your camera on, state your full name, and state your street address. When you're ready, Jennifer, you can unmute yourself and you'll have 5 minutes to speak.
Hi there. My name is Jennifer Ferguson, and I live at 12 Riverfield Drive. I have children who attend WIS and Hurlbut, and as a parent in this community, I'm very concerned about the safety on our school campus. Last week was the anniversary of the Newtown School Massacre 11 years ago. While many other districts have worked constructively with their communities to ensure the safety of their students, teachers, and staff, I don't feel that we have done the same. I don't send my children to school every day feeling that they are safe. Our collective asks for understanding what security upgrades have been met with a gross lack of transparency, in my opinion. Thus far, our asks for an armed SRO have been ignored with no explanation or reason given. Anyone can still walk or drive through the school campus at any time. Our children at Hurlbut play in an area adjacent to where those people can walk or drive with no additional security measures taken. I have some questions and concerns specifically about the following. I would like to understand why the community wasn't notified for several days following the abrupt resignation or dismissal of a beloved and very capable security officer. I'd like to understand why there was a stated concern from a BOE member that Mr. Fisher was transparently answering questions from parents about his perspective on the state of the school safety plan. As a steward of safety at Hurlbut, I would expect any parent who would value his POV. I'd like to understand why there seems to be no clear succession planning scenario for the departure of Mr. Fisher. The campus pickups and dismissals post his departure have been chaotic and seem to be lacking a strong security presence or plan. I'd like to understand why there was no plan for how to message the students on Mr. Fisher's departure, with such a strong emphasis on social emotional learning as part of the Hurlbut curriculum. Providing closure for the abrupt disappearance of one of the most visible and beloved grown-ups seems very unaligned. I'd like to understand why there was no plan in place to introduce Mr. Aquino as the new security officer to the Hurlbut students and parents. If there was an emergency scenario, how would our children know who to seek out and who to listen to? Today, specifically, I'm focused on 4 key priorities. Having a security audit done by a professional outside agency with deep expertise on school security. Having Weston Public Schools operate with true partnership and accountability with the Weston community, including sharing the plan, the rationale, and reasons for security upgrades or not. Having an armed SRO for Hurlbut and WIS mirroring benchmark safety standards and what our neighbors in Westport, Ridgefield, Easton, Reading, New Canaan, Darien have already done. Naming a parent rep who could be under an NDA who has access to the BOE executive sessions on school security to ensure community representation. In conclusion, I'm really disappointed by how Mr. Fisher's departure was handled, and I continue to be dismayed by the lack of transparency, urgency, and collaboration from the BOE on the plans to upgrade our security ecosystem.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Is there anybody else who's an attendee watching that would like to speak? Please raise your hand. I have no one else raising their hand at this time. We
Great,
can
thanks,
move on
Jody.
from public comment.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for making your comments. The next item on the agenda, item number 6, is old business, a discussion and a vote to change the 2023-24 district calendar. Lisa?
Yes, thank you, Steve. I come to you tonight with two things that I would like to talk to you about. The first one, I guess, is really for informational purposes because, well, I guess there's a vote, but it's a sort of a state law. So I think that we have to vote in support of it. What it is that we received notification, about 3 weeks ago from the Secretary of State that they have changed the date of the Connecticut primary. We usually like to have those primaries on professional development days. And so therefore we need to move our professional development to April 2nd. 2024 in order to make sure that that's a Tuesday, that the primary can take place at the middle school. So that's the first thing that we need to take care of it. I don't know if you'd like to have a vote to.
Were there any questions from the board? Does this require a vote?
Mm-hmm.
It does? Okay.
Yes, because you're amending the calendar that was already voted on, so I just need a quick vote on this one.
And what's the date again, Jody?
It's going from April 30th to April 2nd.
Okay.
And there's motion line. Well, you can just say as recommended.
Okay. So the motion is to move that the Weston Board of Education approve the change to the 2023-2024 district calendar as recommended. Do I have a motion to approve?
Let's see. I don't have the verbiage in front of me, but I will make the motion. I move that we approve the proposed change for as recommended by the state for changing the calendar for the 2024-2025 school year. Or no, 2023-2024 school year. Sorry.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Seeing none. The next item is new business. This is a discussion for the Weston Public Schools safety and security.
Excuse me. I'm sorry, Steve. There's another part to the calendar that we need to talk about. Sorry about that. The second part of the calendar is about setting the graduation date. Many of you, I think, are aware that Connecticut General Statute 10-161 now gives us the ability to, the Board of Education may establish for any school year a firm graduation date of students in grade 12, which is no earlier than the 180th day noted in the calendar originally adopted by the school board for that year, which means that we can set the date and we don't have to, count out snow days, which can be problematic, especially when there's a great deal of snow. So what we would like to do is to set the date now in June, with the last day of school being June 13th. And regardless of snow days, that our seniors would graduate on June 13th. Ms. Canetta, the high school principal, I know supports this. Megan, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I just appreciate the support, and I know that families were also requesting this as well. It really helps them make plans, especially when we have relatives flying in for big events like a high school graduation. It really allows them to firm up those plans without waiting for those dreaded snow days.
And it should be noted that our seniors at that point are on internship, which is very helpful, I think, with the planning of everything. And we've talked with the administrative team about this and any impact. And we think that, we actually think this is a great idea. So we would ask you to consider it and then take a vote. Thank you.
Questions, comments? So
I also
this-
actually heard from the PTO too, that this is really key because they're trying to plan the post-grad entertainment, the PGE for the seniors, and they're having a difficult time getting places to hold multiple dates for them. So I think that we're gonna have a very happy parent population by doing this.
So this is item 7B, but may I have a motion to move that the Weston Board of Education approve the Weston High School graduation date as recommended?
I so move.
Is there a second?
I second.
Great. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Terrific. Moving on to 7A, Weston Public Schools Safety and Security Winter Update. Joe?
I'd like to say a few words before Mr. Rios starts, and I have to apologize, Steve. I see that actually was new business, the graduation date. I guess I just figured we were talking about the calendar.
That's okay.
So the last time that we had a security update was in the spring, in actually of April 2023. And so I think it is a good time, especially given the comments this evening, to review what has been going on with safety and security. I also want to thank the Board of Education for supporting the hiring after that meeting in the spring, if you recall, after that April meeting, in response to concerns in the community in the hiring of the Director of Safety and Security, Mr. Rios, who, as we know, comes with a wealth of experience. So I really appreciate, and as does the entire administrative team. I think that we are in good hands. I remember I've been here a long time, and I have a long history with safety and security in the district. The team that we currently have at the public schools speaks to 170 years of law enforcement. So we have a very talented group of security specialists, as well as 25 years as school resource officers, which I think is very impressive. So, Mr. Rios, if you'd like to take us through what has been done since the spring when the board supported your hiring and the work that you did. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Lisa, and good evening to everyone, the board members and members of the public who are attending this meeting. I'll start when I was hired late July, early August. I started out with initial school assessments with Captain Matt Brodacki from the Weston Police Department. Basically, Matt and I, we walked all the schools, interior, exterior, and we came up with what we believe were some really good recommendations for improvements for our school district that hopefully will be reflected in future budgets, possibly as early as 2025. As Lisa mentioned, I do firmly believe we have a very strong security team, a group of specialists who have many, many years of law enforcement experience, also many years of experience as school resource officers, working with children, teaching DARE, being involved with our youth is really, really important as they work in our schools as we speak. As many of you know, we recently lost Mr. Hudak in November. He was at the middle school, and recently Jim Fisher resigned from Hess Elementary School. And so with those losses, and we wish them both the best in their future endeavors, I believe we have hired 3 strong security specialists. We have Mr. Dauber, who is at our middle school. Rob has over 20 years of experience as a retired state marshal. He also was a former safety advocate at Danbury High School. We also hired Mr. John Aquino, who was he's at Hurlbut right now, but he was our initial floater when he started in the district. Mr. Aquino again, has a terrific background. He was over 20 years with the Orange Police Department. He was a school resource officer. He was involved in the detective division. He taught DARE. And then he recently retired from the University of New Haven Police Department as a sergeant. We were fortunate when John started in the district that he was cross-trained by Jim Fisher at Hess and also by Stu Mendelson up at WIS. So I've received nothing but positive reports and reviews on John since he started. And that was coming from the faculty, the administration, and the parents at WIS, and then the faculty, administration, and parents at Hess. So I think, again, we're very fortunate that John has joined us. Most recently, we hired Richard Agosto. Richard, also known as Joey, again, comes highly recommended to us from the Bridgeport Police Department. He has well over 20 years of experience. He was a school resource officer. He was a detective. Joey is very good with the community. He recently, after working for the Bridgeport Police Department, he retired from the Department of Mental Health. So Joey will be starting, we're looking for him to come on board January 2nd, and everything looks like he will be starting at the high school. And we're very fortunate to bring Joey on board. Continuing along with our strong team of security specialists, we work very well, obviously, with the Weston Police Department. And knowing that we have two SROs in our school district, Officer Kim and Officer Marsili, again, great partners that work day in and day out with students, faculty, and parents on a variety of issues. You will see every once in a while, John and Jason will be down at WIS. They also frequently visit Hess. So we appreciate their support. And a lot of this comes under the leadership, most of it, give a lot of credit to Chief Ed Henyon and to Captain Matt Prodacki, who I have worked previously in my career at Newtown. And it's been kind of a seamless transition working with Matt and working with Ed and their team. They are very supportive of the Weston School District. And when I first started, they mentioned that, and you see those guys out there every day doing the best job that I think possible. We also are very fortunate that we have the Mile of Safety officer who each and every day patrols our campus, visits any one of our 4 schools at any time. You'll see them at stop signs, crosswalks, again, keeping our campus safe, and they can respond to any one of our buildings in a moment's notice. So after mentioning our partnership, the strength of our security specialists, I'd like to go into some of our initiatives, our enhancements, some of the things that I reviewed along with the district administrators, security specialists, and school team leaders. So we have looked at portable radios, and we did a district-wide audit and inspection of all the radios, and that was successfully completed. We also are currently looking at a new radio system with enhanced improvement. I think everybody's aware that the town recently signed on. They are going to be going to a new radio system. So we're looking at the school system, interoperability, being able to communicate not only within the district, improving communications, but also being able to work very closely with first responders. We also did a review and audit and completed our inspections of our cameras, and we will be making improvements across the districts with our closed circuit TV cameras, which are very valuable to us. They help us to keep an eye on the campus and also to review incidents that take place throughout the district. Our mass notification system, also known as Alertus, we've reviewed that. Our support and software has been updated, and we're also looking at other options when it comes to those features. We've looked at fencing, and we're considering upgrades across the district, including WIS and including Hess. We've looked at doors, front doors, hardening of our entry systems, our access control across the district. We have a new integrator that we're working very closely with. Again, I think we're making some very strong inroads that are really important to hardening our district. And the multiple layered approach is the best way to go when it comes to that. Our all hazard safety plan has been updated It has been reviewed, revised, and this is an annual plan that is submitted to the state of Connecticut, the Department of Emergency Services, Public Protection. So thank you to the schools and their leaders for their participation, working with their school safety committees on a day-to-day basis. Months and weeks ahead, we'll continue with that strong safety message. I've been involved in leadership trainings. Most recently at WIS, we've talked about some lockdown shades, and we were looking at upgrading some of our safety manuals. And we also had some training on swatting. So I think we're really making some strong inroads there and making some good things really come to life. Last on my list that I had before I turn it over to Mr. Cross is, again, to emphasize our relationship with the police department. I have monthly meetings with the police department. I know our SROs work collaboratively with our school administrators. They're in meetings, they're involved with students. You see them every day. So that partnership will continue. And again, talking about school safety and security, nothing is more important than that in my discussions with the police department. And so we're very fortunate, and I want to thank them again for their support on a day-to-day basis.
So I just want to add in terms of funding requests. So as Joe mentioned, security really is an ongoing initiative and an ongoing improvement. To that end, we will be requesting in our capital budget for the upcoming fiscal year funds that will address some of the issues that Joe mentioned and other initiatives that, of course, unfortunately, we cannot discuss in a public session. So rest assured that we do take this matter seriously, and we are requesting the funds to address the request that we have.
Thank you, gentlemen. I want to give the board time to ask any questions and also take advantage of the fact that we do have Chief Henyon here. And I also want to reiterate that, when they did the audit this August, or the assessment in July, August, it was a very thorough assessment. And there have been things on that, what Captain Burdocki talked about, that have been taken care of. However, we cannot get into specifics because it jeopardizes the safety of the children and the staff in those buildings. I don't know if the board has any questions about anything that we can discuss publicly, or would like to share some feedback, thoughts.
I have some questions, but I don't have to start if someone else has ones they want to jump in. Otherwise, I'm happy to start.
I have a couple of questions as well.
All right. Why don't you start? I'll go second.
Okay. So going back to our May meeting, we talked, we talked about, an all of the above approach. One moment.
David, should I start?
Maybe.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
All right. Excuse me. So we talked about, you know what? Go ahead. I'll come back.
All right. You got it. Lisa, I hear your point about some of this has to be a bit more vague to kind of, obviously protect the specificity of some things. But Mr. Rios, first of all, thank you for giving us the update. I appreciate that so much. Can you give, both for us and also for the parents who are listening, is there some sort of is there a grade or an assessment that you could assign, meaning you've done this bit of an audit? Upon doing it, kind of, to the extent you can share some sort of a snapshot of that, what kind of a grade would you give it when you did the sort of audit, and what strides you think we have made in terms of overall improvement since that time?
Well, it's a difficult question, Chad, to give it a grade.
Maybe that's a dumb way to think about it. Honestly, what I'm trying to do is help us understand what has changed without, to Lisa's point, saying this thing, which you don't want to do, of course, because that sort of defeats the purpose of having some of these measures, which are not actually public. So I'm trying to give you some latitude. How can we understand the progress that has been made?
Right. Well, I hope that my report highlighted, some of the areas, some of the areas of security are ongoing, right? You're going to be doing things on a daily, monthly. The audits and the inspections, should be done yearly. So coming into the district for me, being new, evaluating new systems, evaluating our processes, and assembling a strong security team. I think that was the major things that I wanted to accomplish. Now we're only 3 or 4 months into the year. So I think that, we're still developing the final plan. And I don't think that plan, it evolves and it changes, as our needs continue. Some might be, dependent upon budgetary issues. Some are personnel matters. But coming into the district right now, and being here, we do have a strong security-minded community. I think our schools are secure, and we're constantly looking for ways to improve that and reinforce, that safety culture on a daily basis.
Joe, if perhaps without getting into too much detail, when we talk about what you and Captain Berdacki, who also brings a wealth of experience to this line of work this summer, give us a little flavor of what that entailed, that process. I mean, it wasn't just a meeting sitting in an office.
No. So for instance, if we were looking at on the exterior of the school, we'd be looking at, there's a term, crime prevention through environmental design. So you could say, well, what does that mean? It could be cutting back shrubs. It could be trimming back trees. You're looking at where your cameras are positioned. You're looking at fencing. You're looking at entryways, things along those lines. Signage, there's a multi-layered approach. So from the outside, you could start there, very easily walk around the building and identify areas that we could improve. How do we keep the threat outside of the school? How do we, delay, deter, respond? And then what we did was we walked inside of the school. So you're looking at some of, door hardening measures, right? Does the door properly close? The security stations. You're looking at, again, interior cameras. You're looking at the hallways. You're looking at courtyards, gymnasiums, open areas where children, students could, in an emergency situation, where would they go? Those are the things that Matt and I looked at. You're looking at fencing also on the exterior of the schools. Again, a big challenge for us in Weston is an open campus. So where's the balance? Again, talking with many staff members and school personnel, that's a concern. If we have individuals on an open campus, whether they're walking their dog or they're walking the track when students are out there. Those are concerns from a security standpoint that we still have those ongoing discussions on how do we handle those in an appropriate measure and how do we balance those needs.
Okay, thank you. David, have you recovered sufficiently? Do you want to pick up the baton or can I keep going?
I've recovered.
Pick up if you want to.
I've recovered too.
Okay. Fire away.
The chagrins of maybe a few. So in May, we talked about an all of the above approach, and that was before you joined us, Joe. And so, when we talked about all of the above, mental health was on that list. Gun safety prevention at home was on that list. Hardening the perimeter of the buildings. There was a program, Stop the Bleed, and even how to properly turn the door locks, which I understand you were a part of, some pretty basic stuff. But one thing that was on that list, which was a recurring theme in May, it was a recurring theme in June. And although we didn't have very many speakers tonight, I did make a note. And of the 5 speakers, 4 spoke about an SRO. Do you have the tools or the knowledge yet to recommend or study the effectiveness of an SRO in Hurlbut or WIS?
Well, the traditional model, David, of a school resource officer, as I was a former SRO, is, law enforcement, you're a school counselor, you're dealing with delinquent acts. So would a true SRO, work in a pre-K to second grade setting? That would be something that would have to be looked at and determined. So I don't know if that fits the current SRO model, and maybe Chief Henyon could, add in on that, add to the comment when it comes to that part of the SRO. Does that answer your question, David, or was there another part to that?
No, I mean, I think the basics of my question is the parents in May overwhelmingly spoke in support of an SRO or some other armed individual at Hurlbut and Wyss. As a board, we never discussed it in public. We then later on, hired you. And so my question is, have we done is the board, do you have the tools? And because the board has not seen a presentation, at least I have not as a board member, on putting an SRO at Hurlbut or Wyss, the pros, the cons, the process, even the basics. Like if it were something of interest, is it something that requires a specialized law enforcement officer to go to training for 3 months? And if we wanted to do this for the fall, you can back out of that. A decision has to be made by May. So here we are in heading into budget season. So no, I'm looking for some sort of background information. We did not explore an SRO or some other armed individual. I do know that Chief Henyon and Captain Bradacki favored, if we were to put anybody armed in the schools, an SRO for liability purposes. But no, I'm looking for some answers, some background information. Where are we at with exploring an SRO or some other armed individual at Hurlbut or Wyss?
Can I interject something there, David? I don't disagree that we've had the folks that showed up both in April and May, and then this evening as well. Overwhelmingly, we're calling for some sort of armed individual in Hurlbut, especially. But that goes back to the school. Was it part of the school climate survey? I'm curious. Did we include any sort of question in the survey, Lisa, that asked about security? Because I want to make sure that just because there has been a vocal contingency of parents in town, that they are, I mean, we're all parents on the board, and I think we all come to the board with different, ideas on security, right? So I'm just curious if the opinions that have been represented at these meetings is representative of the entire school community, or just of a vocal minority. And so how can we find that information out as well?
So if I may, and Tracy, please feel free to jump in. The survey that we did was a survey that went across the district. And the survey, there was a standardization of the questions and the way things were asked. And it was about, yes, social emotional safety and physical safety. There was not a question that specifically said, do you want an armed presence at the elementary schools? Because quite frankly, that wasn't the purpose of the survey. That's a very different kind of survey asking that question. Now, I'm not saying that isn't something that, if the board and the community want to pursue, and as you said, Sharon, that there's consensus, they want to pursue it, then that would be done a bit differently. I can tell you that the information regarding both physical and, safety, and are you connected with adults in the building, was very, very high across the groups that children felt safe. Tracy, I don't know if you're going to add, if you want to add anything to that particular survey piece.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Lisa, you kind of got to the heart of the matter as you were talking about the purpose of the survey. The purpose of the survey was to assess the overall district climate. And there were not questions that are quite as specific as what we're discussing tonight. I think, Lisa, the question on the survey that you're referencing is, I feel the school is physically safe. And the responses to that, yes, were overwhelmingly positive. All of the time was 52%, most of the time 38%. So that's the data point that I think most closely aligns to this conversation. And again, I think we're mindful that the purpose of this was to look more broadly at a variety of areas like parent involvement, student comfort from a social emotional standpoint, being in school, et cetera.
Tracy, I think that we're getting away from the question, so I'm going to ask it again, but can you restate, you said that the survey that you just referenced, 52% was the high mark for who felt safe in the building. Is that right?
No.
There are multiple categories. All of the time and most of the time account for
80 some odd percent.
About 90% of the survey participants.
What was all of the time?
All of the time, 52%.
Okay. So 48% of respondents, and this wasn't a question about something as awful as someone showing up to our school with a gun. This was a simple safety question. I feel safe almost every place I go, but I've been to places where things, concerts, religious buildings, where things happen. So 48% of respondents to a non-direct question about putting an armed individual in the school said or chose not to say that they were safe, felt safe 48% of the time. So I don't think the survey directly, well, if 52% said they do, then 48% don't.
Well, no. What was the other 30% or 30+%? They said that they felt safe most of the time, correct? So I think that that's a bit of a stretch, David, to say that 48% of the people don't feel safe at school is what you're kind of leading to.
48% said they did not answer affirmative that they felt safe. The point
100% of the time.
The point being is that I'm still looking for some sort of feedback from either Joe or Chief Henyon about where we're at in looking at putting an armed individual at Hurlbut or Wyss.
If I can start the answer, and then I would defer to the chief. Last spring, when we had talked about that, there was, there were clearly people that wanted armed officers, and there was a distinction between arming security officers versus SROs being armed. And at that point, we were moving forward with hiring the director. We were moving forward with hiring another security specialist to get the number back up to, well, it's still not what it used to be, through the budget. And at that point, there was no plan to put in other SROs in the other two buildings, as this is the way that it's implemented is through the town and through the police department. I think what Joe Rios also said is very important. I was in the original committee in the movement to get the SRO at the high school, and we had researched it. We went, there was a lot of work to be able to get that school resource officer in, and then the town and the police department very generously supported a second school resource officer in. I have to say, at that point, the main emphasis wasn't, we want a police officer with a gun in the school. What we wanted was someone that connected in the way that Mr. Rios talked, especially at the secondary level with students. We have SROs that work closely with the Juvenile Review Board. We have SROs that have an open door policy because young adolescents and our high schoolers are able to access him during the day, where the little children are not left unattended to be able to go to the SRO's office or that kind of thing. I'm not saying there's not a value in having an SRO, but the direction at that point was this. Now, if you're saying that there is a feeling that perhaps you want to go in another direction, then I would say that that's the direction that the town needs to handle. However, I want to reiterate Sharon's point. 48% said they were not safe 100% of the time. And I think it's a far reach to say that I don't feel safe 100% of the time, every moment. We're clearly here to support the best safety measures we can with our students, but there are different layers if you want to move in the direction of two other SROs in the district that would involve the other boards, the police commission, and everything else. Chief, I think maybe perhaps it would be helpful if you could clarify right now some of this.
Sure. Number one, I 100% agree with Joe. The SRO program is a program, and it's normally in the upper level schools, the high school and the middle schools, for all the reasons I don't need to repeat. It's not just putting someone with a gun in the school. It's a program where they educate. they're present in the school for children to come to talk to, who have maybe some issues, etc. And it's a very, very successful program. It's shown by last year's graduation at the high school, where the student body chose the SRO as their faculty speaker. I mean, that's just unbelievable. There are some districts in Connecticut that don't want officers in the schools. In Weston, that's not the case. It's absolutely the opposite. There's thought we put one in every school. Number one, like Lisa said, it would have to involve the police commission, the board of selectmen, and the board of finance. I do not have the manpower right now to supply 2 additional officers. We would have to hire additional officers to do that. Hiring officers right now is a difficult hoe to row right now. They're few and far between candidates for police departments. I have up to 5 officers retiring possibly next fiscal year. I repeat, up to 5. I have 15. That's going to be very difficult for Weston to fulfill. And if you add on additional 2 officers, and you want officers who want this program, I don't want to assign officers to be an SRO when they have no motivation or inkling to do it. That's a disaster for a police department. It's a disaster for a school. Joe Rios was an SRO. You have to have that fire in your belly to work with children, or else it's not going to work. Right now, I don't have the manpower to do it. I don't have the funding to do it. For all the reasons we stated before, we don't have an armed officer, either security or an SRO in the schools, but we're literally right out front. And I know there's a difference, and I know families feel secure if there's an armed police officer or possibly a trained security officer in the school. But right now, that wasn't on the table when we spoke in the spring. We suggested the police department that we do the Board of Ed approve the security improvements that were done over the summer, that they hire a director of security, which is kind of the professional trend around Connecticut. The boards in the area are doing that to coordinate the security response. And you can see already Joe has been here just a few months and has coordinated and driven the security improvements quicker than I've ever seen in the district. So.
Can I just ask a more general question? Will we as a board ever get a report of the pros and cons of putting an armed individual, which everyone in May of last year thought it was an SRO? There was, I remember talking to Captain Burdacki and you, Chief Hennion, the concept of arming anybody other than a sworn law enforcement officer was, I think, something that you, Chief, didn't have an appetite for. You felt that the risk was way higher than you'd sign off on. So all I'm asking, SRO, SSO, or a Brinks armed security person, I don't know. But folks in town have asked about an armed individual in Hurlbut and Wyss. Will we as a board ever get a recommendation for or against?
Well, there's very large differences between what you just described. A school resource officer is a fully trained, certified police officer. An SSO is an armed security guard. There's a huge difference between them. Their responsibilities, their training, their use of force. Again, we talked a little about this in the spring. It's a big sea change for the Board of Ed to choose a program like this. The arming of the officers has to follow state statute. There's obviously labor implications to it. There's training implications to it that the board has to agree to before we, decide to move forward with looking at any of it.
But doesn't it start with a study by people who are experts in the field, for which I can assert there's not a single member on the board of 7 of us that are law enforcement. So none of us have any experience and in this. We need.
I agree, David. None of us are law enforcement specialists, myself included. But I think that Chief Hennion, last year, it was either you or Captain Burdacki who referenced, I believe, a Secret Service study that had been done on where the threat lies as far as armed intruders for the school and where the security was, and it behooved. The threat for the upper schools was on having the intruder, having the person who is shooting be in the school. And the threat in the lower schools was basically coming from outside.
Correct.
So we use that, I think, as a basis for the reason as to why we would have armed SROs in the upper schools and not have armed security guards in the lower schools.
Right. The preference
Correct?
for hardening the physical
Hardening.
security of the lower schools, which is what started to happen in a more meaningful way and during the summer.
So what happens when somebody shows up and makes entry into Hurlbut Elementary School? We wait for the police to show up. And they could be there in a minute, and they could be there in 3 minutes. That could be one dead child, it could be 10 dead children. Somebody who is a professional should be giving us a report so we can close the loop.
If I may, David, you're talking about a report. I think the first thing, one of the things that we can outline is the cost. But I would respectfully suggest if someone were at the top floor, where the SRO was at the top floor of the science wing at the high school, and there's over 30 doors there, and someone got into that high school, it could take a significant time as well to rush down and get there. And there are some other details. I caution us to think, because there is an SRO with a gun attached to his hip, that he is going to be right there in that very moment to get there. And I would say, as far as the experts, I all along have supported the level of expertise of Captain Brodacki and Chief Henyon, and relying also now on Director Rios, all of whom were intimately involved with the Sandy Hook situation, on their recommendations. So we can certainly put down the numbers for you, but this is a decision that would have to be made more at the town level and the community level, including all of the other boards. I'm not trying to evade it, but that's the reality.
Or the SRO in particular. But I do have to say, David, and I hear you. I hear your concern. I really do. But I also have to say that whenever there is a gun present in that building, the number one killer of children in this country is firearms. And as soon as there is a gun inside those buildings, suddenly the chance of an accidental shooting skyrockets, no matter who's holding the gun.
I would love to see that statistic. So if you can send that to me.
Hold on, time out. You mean no matter who's holding the gun, there's suddenly a gun there, which means that there is a chance your child could be involved in an accidental shooting. Period. There is no chance if there's no gun in the building. Zero chance. But if there are guns in the building, there is a chance.
That's a crazy comparison. That's like saying that if someone shows up with a gun, there's zero chance if we don't have an armed individual that we can have some equal response.
If someone shows up with a gun, how are they getting into the building? That's my question.
We're not gonna answer this debate tonight. But David, if you would like to have a conversation amongst the board to have a study to do this, then we as a board should take that up and have that conversation amongst ourselves. There's just a lot of information out there. One of the individuals talked about what surrounding towns are doing and mentioned Westport. What that individual said was not right. They have 8 schools and 4 SROs. They don't have 8 SROs. So there's just lots of numbers around. And if it's the general consensus of the board that we should engage in something like this, then let's talk about it amongst ourselves. And we're not going to do it tonight because it's not an agenda item, but we certainly can have the conversation in the future.
I guess I'll jump in here. Look, I'll say I want to thank the public for the comments and the emails as well. Look, I was the most recent person here on the other side of that dais, obviously, when addressing the board in April or May. I know how frustrating it can be to address the board and not be responded to, frankly. And I know everyone on the board is trying to do their best here, obviously. we all want the same thing, which is the safety and the security of the kids. But I think I think this is part of the frustration, right? I think we talk in circles and no one gives actual answers here. David talked about the all of the above approach, and Joe, I appreciate everything that you've done and you've said. Lisa, I know you're super passionate about this. I know you and I have had discussions about it. I know you've been pretty, forward leaning on some of these things. And Chief Henyon, I haven't had the opportunity to meet with you yet, but I plan to. Look, I think of this in three sort of buckets, right? Securing the perimeter, and we've talked about some things tonight with respect to securing the perimeter and potential for fences. We've talked about the infrastructure and securing it and upgrading it, and you've mentioned a few of those tonight, Joe. And then I think the third piece here that's missing that I have seen, and you all know, this was something that very, very much sort of animated me back in April and May. I think we have to flesh out the armed security officer, SRO, SSO. I think we have to do that once and for all. I think we need some sort of process or study to evaluate it. From what I've heard from everyone, the SRO program has been such a positive experience at the upper two schools. So I don't understand why there's such reticence to even consider it frankly, from everyone that's spoken tonight, with the exception, I think, of David. And so I've seen no studies. I've seen no assessment. And I think we owe it to the town. We owe it to our own credibility, frankly, to flesh it out. And guys, if it turns out that there are more negatives than positives, then so be it. We all move on. But this is going to be an evergreen discussion if we don't deal with it once and for all. So look, I move for a process, right? Move is the wrong terminology in this scenario, but I think there should be a process. I think there should be a timeline. I think that there should be a process to evaluate, a timeline with metrics and other criteria that are worked out between Joe and the police. And I think we should get updates periodically, because frankly, to everyone's point, if it is an SRO, there is a budgetary process here that needs to be considered from the town level. And so working backwards from that, we have everyone until May to figure out, whether or not it's viable. And then, of course, if it is, to recommend it. And then for the town to, of course, incorporate that in the budget, as I understand it, again, new to this. So look, those are my comments. I do think we need to bring people along. I think we need to increase transparency. One more point here. Just look, we had the survey, and that's great. And 52% feel safe all the time. And that's awesome. Obviously should be higher. But that was also before people really started tuning into what was going on and whether or not those people, right? Let's say Mr. Fisher, for example, were in fact armed. So I think I don't think that data is as straightforward as you think it was. And so I would caution not to infer too much into that survey. So those are my comments.
Thanks, Michael.
There's a trap here that we try to solve the wrong problem.
Can we
Meaning,
go back to one quick question? Could we just find out from Joe or Chief Henyon, since Joe, you came from Newtown, and Lisa mentioned touring, I think, Newtown recently. Does Newtown have an SRO in every school across all grade levels?
I don't believe they do, David. I don't believe they have an SRO in every school, and they have armed and unarmed guards, if that would also be part of the equation.
Okay.
There are other school districts that have armed security. They may not be SROs, but they have armed security in many, if not all of the schools. So Steve, to your point before, I know people take sort of, all of the surrounding towns and say, there are armed guards in every single one of these schools, and that's not necessarily the case. But I can name you, multiple towns that do, not necessarily SROs, but SSOs. And I think we just talk in circles. Sorry, Lisa. I think we just talk in circles, and we're never going to come to a conclusion and give people the peace of mind until we actually run a process that's measurable and that I think everyone can have confidence in.
I think also, I agree, Michael, that there are other towns that have armed security guards in all of their schools. But Chief, if I recall correctly, you talked about an area in which you worked prior, in which the square mileage of the area was tremendous. And so it made total sense when the response time was going to be affected by the proximity of the police department to the schools for them to have armed guards in all of their schools. I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Chief, but I think Weston is a little bit of an anomaly in that our police department is adjacent to the school campus.
Yes, I stated that at the last meeting. I was with the state police. We cover multiple towns at one troop. There are very few SROs in those schools. They were taken out due to budgetary concerns over the years, which is another problem for a police chief and a troop commander, where at the time everybody wants an SRO in the school, and then when there is not enough patrolmen to be out on patrol, they're taken out of the schools and put back on patrol. Got to remember, we have the town of Weston to protect too. If I have 9 patrol officers and I have 4 of them in the schools, that's a huge percent of my agency tied up into the schools. Not saying it's not needed. I'm just saying that's an unusually high amount of police in any one area in the town. I have other, needs in the town for policing. That's why I say we have to involve the police commission. I have complaints about stolen cars and speeding that I have to deal with. I have minimum 2 officers working, protect 10,000 people 24/7. And I'd have 4 officers in the school. So those are all things we'd have to take a look at. And the town decides, not me, the chief. Each district, each town does it based on their own needs, based on their own priorities. In Weston, we have all the schools right next to each other. We have a large number of officers per capita of my department at the schools. My opinion may be different if I worked in a town that had a larger square mileage and the schools were all in the corners of the towns. It's not the case in Weston. Those are why I made the comments that I made in the spring.
But we're not gonna resolve this tonight, and it is a conversation the board should have in depth because it's multifaceted. It's should we or should we not? And that's one decision. If the answer is yes, we should, what should we have? Should they be police officers? Should they be armed security guards? And then the next question is, to whom do they report and what's entailed with that? And there's a cost associated with it. So there's a belief by some members that we should be doing this and we should have this conversation. And frankly, we probably should put it on next month's agenda. And look, we're just going to go in circles tonight, right? And so, if this is what the board would like to talk about in depth, focused on it, then let's do that. And
Well,
let's
Steve, I gotta
come to
jump
a
in for a
decision.
second. I'm sorry for interrupting. I gotta jump in for a second because that's actually a step down the road too far, which is what I was gonna say is the trap here is that we try to solve the problem of should there be an armed guard at Hurlbut. The problem should be what are every single thing that we're doing to keep our kids safe at Hurlbut. If the answer to that question is an armed guard keeps our kids much safer, then that should be one of the considerations that we put into this whole mix. But an all of the above approach would really mean we have to look at all the improvements that have been made between that last year and this year, which there have
But that'll be part of any conversation.
Well, but the point is that this conversation is getting reduced to like, should we have an armed guard or not? And the question is like, does an armed guard make our kids measurably safer? If it does, then we should probably have that conversation. If it doesn't, then we should do
Isn't that
stuff too.
Isn't that part of the whole conversation?
Yeah, but right now, all the comments from parents are about arming someone. Not all of them. I'm exaggerating, but many of them about that.
Well, then maybe we should do what some people suggested this evening is a safety audit, a third-party safety audit. I'm not suggesting that we should or we shouldn't, but it is certainly a heated topic.
Well, I could diffuse the heat and I could bring the circle full circle. You know, a month ago, I brought up this document by DHS and FBI, right? I mean, the discipline is documented. I did my diligence. If David and Mike want to do further diligence, I'll send it to them. But what the chief and what Mr. Rios and others say is the playbook. And they've done a fantastic job, at least going down the playbook in my mind. But certainly we can bring in other expertise and match their playbook with what the DHS says is a layered approach, where a small element is this atomistic discussion about personnel within the interior of a building. But maybe that's the match, right? Go with the DHS recommendations versus what the chief and Mr. Rios have articulated well.
Peter, we need to do what's best for Weston. That's what we keep talking about. I don't know how I read your document. I think that I agree with Steve. We're going in circles at this point. I think that there is interest among Board of Ed members that we should run to the ground the security steps that we've taken. We did an all of the above approach based on May, but we left one thing on the table, which we've not run to the ground. And that is, what would an armed individual at Hurlbut or West provide? And I'm perfectly fine if the results are it would not provide anything appreciable. I am advocating for all of the above. I'm not advocating for an action on all of the above. So all I'm asking for is that we run to the ground what the one item we did not from last May, and we move on.
David, I agree with you. I think that we should evaluate it. We should see if it makes things noticeably better. Also weigh it with the risks of what does it do by having an armed security guard there. I'm just trying to say forcefully that we have to talk about all the stuff we've been discussing. I'll give an example. So the safe storage effort that came directly out of last year's conversations, also the threat assessment effort that came directly out of last year's conversations, both of which have been implemented, probably not nearly as far as they can. I'll give you a number. I think it's 77% of the guns that happen, or of gun violence that happens in schools, you know, K through whatever, 4 schools, or something, they're weapons that are in the community already. So this whole piece about safe storage, which by the way, I think I'm remembering this correctly, that it's actually illegal not to have your weapons stored safely in Connecticut right now. This is a apolitical thing that if we can get more sort of like buy-in on this idea, it's a simple thing that could probably noticeably shift statistics.
But the fallacy with that statistic, and I listened to everything that Chief Henyon said and Captain Brodacki said, and there was 2 things that really resonated with me. One, keep the fight outside, right? And I think that we've all gotten around the concept of delay entry into the building so the police department can show up. But the other really important statistic, which we've quoted here tonight, is that the folks that show up to the elementary school and intend to do harm to those children are not people on the inside. I believe the statistic that Captain Brodacki gave us was it was 1 of 2 people, generally speaking, a parent with an axe to grind, or somebody outside the district, no connection to the community, that just randomly chose to target the community. So when we talk about properly locking up a gun, I think that that's extremely helpful at the middle school and high school level.
No, it's the elementary school level. It's actually the elementary school level.
I know, but that's not to believe it. That's a program for the town, and that's that's a much broader conversation than what we're having here, talking about the schools. Yeah, it's great. We should everyone should lock up their guns, but that's not this conversation tonight.
Isn't the whole point of this conversation? It needs to be, to David's point, like on all of everything, like everything we can possibly be doing to help the kids be safe. We should do that, including, if the data supports it, this idea of evaluating an armed guard in the schools, if the data supports it. Isn't that the point?
Well, that is the point.
Chad, which is why I'm asking to set up a process, right? And then let's see where that leads us. And if the data leads us, whether one direction or the other, at least we can all be satisfied at that point that we've made at least the most informed decision, and it gives us credibility. It builds confidence with the community. I think that would help everyone. No one is advocating for we have to do X, but I do think we have to run a process.
And I'm not either. All I'm suggesting is the process should be looking at the entire safety of how we try to reduce the threat of gun violence at our schools. I mean, we still have, as an example, we still have a bunch of parents who are still listening to this meeting, which is great. I'm glad they're listening. And we clearly have not done a good enough job talking about the things that we have done since last year. And now, if we, to your point, try to close the loop, run this process,
it goes back
out all the different things that could go into this, including potentially arming someone. So I'm just pointing out, I don't think the discussion should be, should we or should we not arm a security guard at Hurlbut? It needs to be, how do we keep our kids safe?
We've done way beyond what we talked about in the spring, post Sandy Hook. We spent considerable amounts of money on our buildings. We had at one point, we just had the mile of safety officer. Then we had an SRO. Then we had a second SRO. We've done this over a period of time. But my view is this is a topic that members of this board would like to discuss in greater detail in an educated manner. And I think we should do that. And I think we should take it up and have that discussion. And if it leads to hiring a third party to guide us in whatever direction, then we should consider that as a board.
I agree, Steve. And I also agree, Michael, with your suggestion of putting a process in place. And as far as transparency is concerned, well, Chad, unfortunately, yes, the overall safety, we won't be able to discuss everything, but we'll be able to discuss the majority, quite a bit of the security measures. But as far as transparency is concerned, Steve, I know that you've mentioned, and I'm saying this for the sake of the folks who are listening right now. You've mentioned having a separate meeting for this to discuss amongst the board. By that, you do not, I'm assuming, I could be incorrect on this, but I'm assuming you do not, and you're not suggesting that we go into executive session where the public wouldn't be there, but you're suggesting a special meeting that the board would have that would be specifically geared towards security and security only. And it would be a discussion that we could all attend and be prepared with, the various statistics. Maybe we could somehow or another have some statistics gathered together and have them sent out so that we could review all the various statistics and have a discussion based upon that. Is that what you're suggesting? Okay. I just want to make sure people don't think that we're going to be having this discussion outside of the public view, because of course it has to be within the public view.
Can I just go back to my original ask is basically where I think we're at. And I think Steve has summed it up. My original ask, which kind of we've come off the rails a little bit from it, is I asked Joe, without not intending to put him on the spot, just knowing that you've been in the district for 4 months, is he ready to make a recommendation? Does he have the tools? And that goes back to my original ask is, does Joe and Chief Hennion and Captain Bradacki, who are the experts, have the knowledge and the tools yet to make a recommendation to close the loop on all of the above? And as I said, and I think Michael said as well, I don't think any of us are cheering for a specific outcome. We're asking for the two most professional people in this group right now to come to us with a recommendation. So I would be all for at the next meeting digging in a little bit deeper, but I would defer to the captain, the chief, and Joe Rios to have them guide us. And it's probably going to be a work in progress. We're not going to solve it at the next meeting. But as Chief Hennion said, hiring folks, law enforcement is exceptionally challenging right now. So if this is something that we as a town are truly interested in pursuing, time is of the essence. Because if we're going to do it, every month that goes by is a lost month.
Bernie, were you
Yep.
going to say
Yeah, I
something?
just wanted to say one thing. We're talking a lot about the future planning and the direction that we should go, and I think that's really important. But I think it's also important that a lot of the concerns people are having are acute and right now. So Chief Hennion and Mr. Rios, for those of us on the board and in the community who have children at WIS and at Hurlbut, are they safe to go to school tomorrow? Does the board need to do anything emergency to put safety precautions in place? Can parents feel good tonight knowing that the kids are going to walk into a building where, you know, we are always going to be working towards something better, but are we in a good place right now where our kids are safe?
So Bernadette, I will say we are in a good place. Your children should feel safe. I feel safe there working in the district, working with the school leaders, our security specialists, and our staff. I know we have to earn our keep every day, but I know that, you know, we work towards school safety, you know, every day. We think about it. It keeps us up at night, but yes, our schools are very safe. And I think that that is supported, you know, by the efforts and the collaborative work experiences we have with our police department.
My last comment, Steve, and I don't want to talk in circles to your point before. I think we just need to set action items here, right, going forward. So when are we actually going to schedule a special meeting? You know, how are we going to set up the process, work back from the timeline, and then obviously incorporating the chief and Mr. Rios in that process so that we can make obviously the most educated decision going forward. And again, give everyone confidence that what we're doing is sort of best in class and obviously, you know, providing the most safety and security for the kids of this town. So I look forward to working with you on that.
Thanks, Michael. Anyone else? Okay, well, we have our marching orders and I'll talk to Lisa in the morning and Joe in the morning.
Thanks, Steve.
Just have to get back to the agenda. So, item number 7C, EdSpace 2023 Conference Update and Presentation. Discussion on the next level of work. Lisa, Peter?
Thank you, Steve. I actually did this presentation at the Educational Optimization Committee meeting. I don't know if, Peter, you would like to add something. You thought it would be helpful to share it here.
Yeah, I'll go through. I think we have slide 14, right?
Yeah. Do you want to wait till we get, why don't we wait till we get to slide 14?
Yeah. And I'll chime in then. That'd be great.
Okay. All right. So thank you to whoever is working the presentation. So in November of 2023, there was a team of 4 from the administration that went to a national convention called EdSpaces. And it was actually in Charlotte, North Carolina. And finance director, Phil Cross, middle school principal, Dan Dope, Tracy Edwards, our director of PPS special education, and I attended this 4-day really amazing conference. And the conference had all different kinds of people there. They had educators there, they had teachers, they had administrators, they had architects, they had people that specialize in furniture, in design, you name it, that they were there. And what we were able to do was to go to a variety of workshops over the course of 4 days. Workshops like designing space to drive innovation, workshops about, positioning schools as community assets, reimagining the design process for student safety and belonging, The whole idea of designing a space to support social emotional well-being. So it really kind of brought everything together about, what does the space look like and how the space dovetails into teaching and learning. We can be talking about new space, we can be talking about existing space, but there were a lot of themes about, the whole concept of student agency and kind of reimagining what the educational space and how it ties to teaching for learning. So as you know, next slide, next slide. As you know, there is a thing in our, I'm sorry, I'm hearing background noises. I don't know if someone can mute themselves. The school district is committed to working with the town on a cohesive integrated plan for schools and town government space. And that's really important because as we know, the schools are Weston and the town are the schools. And so we really have to work together on whatever we're going to be doing moving forward. We share space, we share the pools, we share the gyms, the fields with all kinds of organizations and town programs. We have to look at our bus garage in the future because of the sustainability component and complying with the law to go to electric buses. We share space also with the police crime lab and different departments of the town. And so we're committed to really looking at this also through the lens of what is our fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers of Weston. And I think that one of the things we learned from this convention, if you will, this conference, is that a shared mindset, next slide, around teaching and learning is really important. And that there are things that we can do without building anything that are going to enhance student learning at scale. The way we teach matters, okay? We must have a student-centered approach, and that's what we've been working towards, where the student is the center of everything that goes on in the classroom. Gone are the days when you have, the teacher on stage and the students there. The way that students are learning and the way teachers are teaching looks very different. We all go to school, so we all come with a mindset of how we approach teaching and learning. But what should that mindset encompass now? The other piece that we learned is we have to connect the academic achievement with students' social emotional well-being. Students must develop a sense of agency. And we've talked a lot about that, how to get students to do achievable goals, how to persevere, solve problems, advocate for themselves. All of that work with ruler and social emotional learning, with dialectical behavioral therapy that's been integrated with our school counselors, all of that work that we do in advisory and the different PBIS initiatives, all really supports that sense of agency. Next slide. Under Dr. Henkel, our staff has spent considerable time looking at the universal design for learning. And by that, what it means is looking at the multiple means of how we engage students in learning. It's reflected in our professional development days. It's been reflected in the way we're documenting curriculum. It's reflected in our the curriculum writing academy that Dr. Henkel led last June. The principals have been working closely with their teachers on this, with the different goals that the teachers have. It's the why of learning. What does the learning look like? How do we have multiple means of engaging children and how they are expressing their learning? The last part of that umbrella kind of links it all together. Where is the learning taking place? What does that look like? Next slide. So the idea of a shared mindset for intentional design of space. The space matters. The student-centric design really is important to fostering that whole sense of agency, and how we connect those UDL principles to the spaces in the school. So when the teachers are documenting and writing their lesson plans, working on their curriculum, how are they also looking at the space to make that a part of how they are engaging students? There was a very short, it's a 50-second video that kind of talks about the salutogenic design of space that I think that is worth watching. And when I watch it, I also think of places in our schools where we have this already, if you please.
Learn one big word to change children's lives. That word is salutogenesis. Yes, that's a mouthful, but all it means is the origin of health. A well-designed school can not only reduce stress, but also improve children's health and well-being. The 3 keys to a salutogenic design are: 1. Comprehensible environments that orient and reassure children by using familiar elements to make spaces legible and wayfinding easy. 2. Manageable environments that allow students to exercise control by being safe, comfortable, and accessible. 3. Meaningful environments that are inspiring, engaging, restoring, and aesthetically rich. Salutogenesis, the first and most important word in school design.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So in looking at school design overall,
Learn one big word to change.
these are sort of the kind of the way I sort of organized some of our thoughts from this amazing conference. You know, the center is all about the shared ownership of space. It's interesting, you know, when you have 25 people in the room, one of the persons is the teacher, but that teacher might own 25 to 30% of the space. And it's just a different way to, how do you make it more flexible? How do you make it so that you can do a lot of different things with a variety of furniture, flexible learning spaces? How can you make technology equitable and interactive to develop that? How do you develop a sense of community to make multi-use learning spaces, the hallways, the classrooms, the cafeterias, the gym, the community spaces? And I really think that we're doing a good job on that. There are examples in every school. And then the idea of sustainability, you know, environmental stewardship, the outdoor learning piece, the composting, the growing of the gardens, the natural surroundings that is the beauty of Weston. How can we continue to build on that? The idea of beauty and calm within the school, natural light, acoustics, the materials that we have on the fabrics, all of that. I just gained such a much deeper appreciation of the importance of that. And that safety is not just physical safety, but it's the social, emotional health and well-being piece. And do we have restorative spaces for children to decompress when needed? And we do. Next slide. I think that we have it in each of our schools, but we don't have it at scale yet. And when you look at Hurlbut Elementary School, specifically in the LLC, you see it. You see the variety of seating. You see how the children are interacting with the space. Ms. Rodko is a master of that. You will be hearing, next slide, about plans for a makerspace, that's going to be a gift that the PTO wishes to do, and how to make that space adjacent to the LLC even more enriching for our youngest learners. You see it at the intermediate school, where you see again in the LLC. Next slide, please. The intermediate school, where you see in the LLC the different seating. You have the little fireplace gathering area. You have the different tables and the maker space with all of the manipulatives. You see the students outside working in the courtyards with the new revitalized green team. All positive ideas. And when I think of the intermediate school, I said, you know, what else can we do in that school? How can we maximize the space in there, Hurlbut, the middle school and the high school, to really focus on that salutogenic design for learning? Next slide. At the middle school, again, you see it in the LLC with the types of seating arrangements that they have, with the TV studio. You see it with the students owning the space on the walls. They're getting back to doing murals again, which is so terrific. You see it in classrooms that are multiple whiteboards where students are demonstrating their thinking and up and about. Next slide. And you see it at the high school. We have some new flexible furniture in the main lobby, for example. The PTO supported that. The PTO also supported the college and career counselor suite there, where you have different seatings, benches, sort of like little booths, all of that. And kids come in there all the time to use the space. We have our community class that actually sells coffee in the main corridor of the gymnasium, that big main Galleria hallway. You see students outside in PE class. You see students going, I used to call it the fun room, again, PTO sponsored, off the library where you see that orange and purple furniture. And students are owning the space by painting the mural in the alternative pathways and planting our wonderful daffodil trail going across the front of the high school. Next slide. It was a really terrific read that it's a very short read. It's called The Space, A Guide for Leaders. And it emphasizes, again, that connection between the ed space, the teaching and learning, and academic achievement. I mean, it only makes sense that kids that feel comfortable and safe, and when you give them high quality teaching that engages them, as the Universal Design for Learning does, that they will, achieve academically. This was a staggering statistic in the book, although ours was higher. I recalibrated it. Our kids spend in school close to 16,000 hours. And I guess the message there is that we must work on making the spaces that we have inviting, welcoming, and mirroring what we're trying to accomplish in teaching and learning. So by focusing on that, we can really empower teachers as well to be more creative and take risks, bring out the best work in students. I think that one of the speakers said, and I do believe it's true, that having this shared vision is so important. And the book made a point of specifying about how inertia and tradition can make this the hardest work. And it's true. You think back to the way we set up schools, the way classrooms are set up. How can we really get on board to embrace this kind of a student-centric design? How can we do something as simple as declutter the room? Teachers, and I'm right there with them, are hoarders. How can you create more of a inviting, flexible space that our students, quite frankly, deserve? They deserve not only caring and supporting teachers, but they also deserve that kind of supportive space. So I've outlined the next steps for the faculty and administration, and then David is going to talk about the EOC and the Board of Ed. So for us, what we would like to do in January is do an analysis of existing spaces, to have teacher and administrator teams just go out and walk around the school, figure out how are we best using this space through the lens. Are there tweaks that we can make? Can we pilot some different types of furniture that our PTOs have been so supportive of providing? We need to continue focusing on that professional development, universal design for learning, and now linking it to the space so teachers see the power of that and really develop that solid understanding. And I also want to review the existing studies that have been done on the work of, what do we do with our facilities through the lens of this student-centric salutogenic designs. David, I'd like to turn it over to you.
All right, I'll take it from here. Thank you. So the setup for this slide is twofold. One is what the superintendent has now, in a sense, created a mandate or a manifesto, or at least a mantra of educational spaces, right? I mean, I was lucky I got an early look at this when I visited IDEO in San Francisco. I mean, this is the 21st century. Now we have to make some hard decisions about the buildings as conduits, as I say here, and other things, right? We have to decide on the campus to enable this educational spaces view of education. So we have some next steps that the EOC and in general the board need to take, and I wanted to outline them here, and they're just a few quick bullets. So we are in the midst of collaborating with the town of Weston to determine the funding parameters. This is not set in stone. This is an open issue. We've given some early insights to what may be necessary, what could be available, the fiscal implications of those, but we certainly aren't at the point of a hard and fast decision about funding or even the parameters we're working in. So that's a responsibility that the EOC has to take to really understand sort of the boundaries we're working in. We still need to recommend a number of schools in grade configurations. Clearly, our current number of schools in grade configurations is established, well understood. It's a building block for implementing educational spaces in a larger plan, but it's not necessarily the end game, right? So again, this isn't set in stone. This is an ongoing investigation, and we still need to sort of put the stake in the ground. So really 1 and 2 go together, right? But in parallel, there's no reason why, as the superintendent has indicated in her presentation, we can't start thinking creatively about 21st century delivery, right? We have lots to work with here. We're learning things as we go to third-party experts, we go to trade shows, conventions, we go to other great campuses that we've identified that are showing some promise in creating interesting educational spaces. And, you know, I like giving homework because typically I'm either looking at homework or trying to figure out my daughter's homework. But I read the book. It took me an hour over, you know, last weekend, and it's a phenomenal read. And I highly recommend it. It's $5 on Amazon, or you can borrow my dog-eared copy. But I really think it's eye-opening what the potential is. And there's no reason we can't implement many of the creative ideas that the authors have put forward in our current campus, let alone a reconfigured and reimagined campus. And I like to emphasize that I think we've certainly come a long way now that the constituents, at least amongst us here, but now we're reaching outward from the administration and the Board of Ed, are starting to share a vision for this excellence, right? I mean, I really think this mindset of looking at great purpose of the internal and external campus design is starting to sink in a little bit. Maybe that's part of my responsibilities is to get the tentacles of this idea further into the community, so more people are involved and more people understand sort of what our ultimate aim is here. And we definitely are injecting ideas of recycling and repurposing and reorientation of flexible space. Again, we have a campus that is working. So maybe it comes down to just doing great things with what we have to work with, but always driven by student-centric design. It sort of sounds like a intellectual or a faddish way of looking at things, but that really is what it comes down to, right? And I think that mindset is my takeaway from educational spaces. I think it's been drilled in pretty deep now. And again, we want to have all of us start thinking in that mode of EOC. And given our earlier discussion, we don't want to lose sight of safety, security, building healthiness, and I'll address that in a second, and operational realities of facilities in the overall campus, right? Clearly, safety and security is getting a lot of attention. Healthiness, I've taken on as a task for myself. In fact, I work with UConn now. They have a building health, sustainability, and energy efficiency design center up in Stores. They're now willing to come down and, as a free third-party service, really audit our capabilities and score us and assess us. I mean, this sounds like something we've talked about earlier tonight, but with respect to building health and educational spaces. And the DOE gets involved, the EPA gets involved. It's remarkable how much resources are being put into healthy spaces and energy efficiency. And that's part of the operational realities that we'll outline and drill deeper into. And then remain vigilant of milestones, of course. We have a DIP. We have our own requirements to look at the aforementioned issues. And as we expand our investigations, new things will arise. But we have milestones that we need to report in on and see how we've progressed on coming to some decisions about reconfiguration of the campus, reimagination of the curriculum, things like that. So that's the bullet points. And I think the educational spaces presentation here feeds right into this wonderfully. And
Thanks.
that's about all I can say on it right now. That's a lot.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Peter. And I'm sorry, I think I called you David. It's
We're
a long night.
It's okay. I mean, we really look very similar.
Do I get to ask the first couple of questions then?
Yeah, sure. You're up.
Go ahead, David.
Okay. So I'm looking at slide 14. I have a couple of questions. The first is the EOC seems to be a rebirth of the FOC, and a lot of this was settled at FOC. It's going to be 4 buildings. We're not going to, that was, I think, widely determined. So there's some things in here that would your committee not benefit by having some folks from the FOC on it, or at least bring you up to speed on where the FOC left off?
Well, it's far from a rebirth of the FOC. I'm not really good at defending the EOC's progress to date, but it's twofold. One is the FOC delivered some recommendations. In the opinion of the EOC, they're incomplete. There are things that haven't been fleshed out entirely, and of course we'll return back to the Tecton slides and really pick through them, and we may have to ask further questions and get really more analysis in areas that we thought that there are gaps in their recommendations. So that's a fallacy that it's a FOC Phoenix Rising. It's its own far reaching look at both buildings as conduits and the campus, and then educational spaces, what happens inside the buildings.
Right.
And
you mentioned like recommend number of schools and grade configurations. I think that's been well settled at this point. It's going to be 4 buildings, and we educate our kids quite well in the configuration we have today. And I have to say, that's coming from somebody who originally felt strongly we should look at 3 buildings, and I was pretty well convinced through the FOC that 3 buildings was not suitable to Weston. So, all right, what about the financing piece? Because that was an area I feel like the FOC left off as well. How does, as your work on the EOC is guided, is it not worthwhile in parallel to work with the Board of Finance on modeling not what this will cost, because we just don't know, but what would a $40 million, $80 million, $120 million spend look like, and go out to the community and ask them what they're able to get their arms around, because that's going to have to inform you in some way where you can go with this. So where are we at with modeling?
I'll answer that. Yeah. I'll answer that question. So you're right, David. The Board of Finance has to come up with a capital budget, and it's not just for the Board of Education, it's for the town as well, because the town has needs that they want, and the Board of Finance has not given us that number yet.
If I may,
but I want to get back to previous. I don't believe the Board of Education has formally voted on the recommended configuration of the schools. To my knowledge, that didn't take place after the Tecton report. I think there's just a belief that we were going to move forward with 4 schools. But I do think we need to come to a decision about the number of schools, 3 or 4, whatever that number is. And we need to determine what we need to do with the buildings. Some might say we shouldn't be constrained with whatever the Board of Finance tells us. We should come up with what we think is correct. It may be a Trojan horse, and the Board of Finance will say, no, absolutely not a chance. Alternatively, we can get the Board of Finance to say, you have $1, and go forth with that dollar and do with it, as you can. But I think the first thing we need to do is say what the optimal number of buildings will be, and then move from there.
But are we working in parallel? I think, Lisa, if you know, I want to ask the question, the 40, 80, 120 million, how we modeled it. So Lisa, I think you may have an answer for that.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say that, and Steve is right, like the Board of Ed hasn't said, okay, we endorse this. And I think that I don't want to be misleading where we say recommend number of schools and grade configurations. I joined the FOC late. However, it clearly came out, and I do recommend 4 buildings. I'll just say it publicly now, 4 schools. But again, that has to be, the board has to approve that. I think the grade configurations we do need to look at. And I also think that we need to look at, and that's why I said that part of our task is to review the existing studies. And you're right, David, review those plans. And I think, quite frankly, that there can be some tweaks made to them based on what we need, and looking at it through student-centered design. Now, that being said, the first bullet that Peter had was collaborating with the town to determine funding parameters. We have to obviously get a sense of funding and also timing and what's going on. I started by talking about there are other things that are in play that involve directly the town. So it's kind of like concurrently, we have to move forward with this, knowing that we have a fiduciary responsibility to the town. I mean, it's not going to be, oh, hey, you have 120, but spend it. It's let's see what we need, how we need to go about it, how we can tweak looking at the Tecton plans, because I've looked at them. I've looked at Silver Petrocelli. I do have some suggestions, but I do think we need 4 schools. And then how can we move forward in the most appropriate way? And that's the work of the town government, the Board of Finance, and you guys.
All right. Okay. So I think it would be really helpful to know that the Board of Finance at least could model. We know 40 million, or 30 million plus was recommended in 2017 just to rehab the school. So it's safe to say we need 40 million just to keep what we have in good shape. 80 million is just a round number to, a little bit of what came out of the FOC to rebuild the schools. And 120 million is a number of people just throwing out there because of inflation. So will we be able to, in parallel to the work the EOC is doing, have the Board of Finance?
Yes.
Okay. And my last question for the EOC, then I'll turn it over to somebody else, is, Peter, a lot of what's on this next steps really seems to be more reimagining the curriculum more so than the building. So is there a way for you on the EOC to kind of separate out where you might be changing parts of the curriculum? Like I know that you are a very big supporter of STEM, inject recycling, repurposing, reorientation of flexible space. Some of that of your work appears to be work that can be done independent of completely reconfiguring, for example, the middle school. So are there components of EOC that are changing how we deliver education without changing the walls of the buildings?
Well, one of the tasks we gave ourselves was to look inside the buildings so that's what we're looking at. And yes, we imagine new curriculums, and yes, there's new ways of delivering education that's more student-centric and pushes them towards their achievement. And yes, that's part of the sustainability concepts we had for energy efficient and building health. So the answer is all these are being considered. This is all in the public documentation that's been presented in the past. So I think the superintendent wants to chime in too.
I think, yeah, and I might ask Dr. Henkel. I don't want anyone to leave to think like, oh, now we're reimagining space to create a new teaching and learning. We're doing it now. We want the space and Dan Oaks to mirror that. For example, you go into the middle school and you go into the labs, okay? The kids can't even go all around the lab table. they're up against the wall and there's only a certain amount of space. That's not conducive to STEM teaching. So that's an example. There are tables in the high school, and okay, they're 20 years old, believe it or not, and they're in those labs. One teacher just decided, I'm going to turn the tables, move them this way, do that. And because it's facilitating the kind of instruction we are doing now. So we have to look at it together and how we want to accomplish that. But it's happening now. We have to just be mindful to make it at scale. Dr. Henkel, would you like to add something about the instruction piece?
Sure. I think you've said most of it already. What we're trying to, whole idea of UDL, Universal Design for Learning, is a teaching approach to break down barriers, increasing access for students, flexibility. And so I think the work around that we showed you about areas that we can already look at flexible furniture to maximize the learning so that students can work in small groups, they can work in pairs, teachers can go back to whole class instruction when necessary, kids can move around the room easily, depending on the activities and the design of the learning that the teachers are planning is the idea. But the reality is that in some spaces, let's say at the middle school, we wouldn't necessarily put all our energy in some of those spaces because they're so confined yet. But maybe there's a space that's more open that we can redesign that room, and it makes sense to invest and look at furniture in the space to maximize the flexibility of the learning.
And it also speaks to kind of the pods of the classrooms. You know, the middle school, they have those pods. And we looked a lot about that, like, what would it look like? How can you, when you look at these classrooms, how can you maximize what you're trying to do in the space that you're providing for interventions or push-ins or bringing larger groups together? All of that is a part of the interior design. You know, are we maximizing that? And that's part of the question. And Tecton began that work. I remember them talking about many of these themes. It's just, it's got to be more intertwined. You know, people kept saying to me, Lisa, well, what's the education space look like? What's education of the future? The future is now. And what we know by those big circles is these are the components that we need to bring about. You know, on one of our tours, we went to a couple of schools, and one of the principals said, you know what, we didn't design enough flex space. Let me give you an example. We didn't design enough appropriate space for the intervention or the nest. You know, we did it here and not there. So we're already learning about this. I mean, there's a nest like restorative space capability in the middle school right now. You know, I have to laugh. When I, years ago, I've been here 39 years, the middle school didn't have solid walls. Right? If they opened up, Patty remembers 5th grade teaching, and then they put the doors in, and then you go and you hear about, you probably shouldn't have put all those walls in every single space because you need to be able to flex it. Dan, I think you wanted to say something about the instructional piece.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in. I think most everybody on the board knows that we're not waiting for the future. We're kind of creating the future as we go. There's been a lot of work. We always highlight the math department, building thinking classrooms, and some of the redesigning of how they teach and how the kids learn and how the space is used. It's taking place already with things like more whiteboards, those non-permanent vertical spaces, so that the kids are walking around the room. In some ways, we're already, the term I learned at the conference was defronting the classroom. It's no longer all facing the same direction towards the teacher or a student who goes to the front of the classroom, but any part of the room can be the focus of teaching and learning. So just a few examples, that's all.
So I think we'll wrap up this section, but
hold on a second. I think Mike was trying to talk, but he was muted.
Sorry about that. I was muted.
Oh, Mike, okay. Go for it.
Good catch, Dan. Lisa, just a quick question. Do we have any diagrams or images of sort of, let's say, what these things could like proposals? Because we're talking just in descriptions here, and it's very hard to understand sort of what we're actually potentially proposing here, right? And I haven't seen anything, and maybe that's because I'm new. But is there a deck or something that we can look through that can show us exactly what we're thinking about, how we're thinking about reimagining, let's say, spaces, and why those would be helpful?
We don't have anything formal with regards to each building, and that's why we want to do this kind of like a school walkthrough and talk about what can we do that sort of aligns with what is being done. The best
Yeah.
examples I can tell you are in the LLC and the makerspace areas. If we can get that kind of sort of mindset into the classroom spaces, that's what we need to do. And we can certainly, like the book is helpful. We can certainly look at some more specifics of what does a actual classroom look like. That would be great. We saw a lot of examples at the convention. I mean, something as simple as those kidney tables that are pretty much something in every single elementary school classroom has a kidney table. They take up a lot of space. You can cut them up into 3 desks that shape the same thing that can flex it out. It's that kind of thing. So I don't know if I'm exactly answering your question, but I think what would be helpful is to do our walkthroughs and then kind of present things that like, this is what we're working on that we can do that is minimal. We're not talking about, and we're going to build, this thing. And then where we want to go and what some of the parameters under which we want to move the any EOC work forward. We can do that.
Yeah, I think it would help if it would just, to just crystallize it for us. We're going from X space that's constraining in so many different ways. You mentioned a lab before, to this new space. And this is how it's going to, like a from to, some sort of comparisons, examples. Sure. Those things would be very helpful in understanding sort of what we're trying to accomplish here.
Sure, we can do that. That's a good idea. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Peter. That was great. Let's move on to 7D, acceptance of Hurlbut Elementary School PTO donation for recess equipment. The donation has a value of $1,000.
Yes, and Ms. Cadis is not with us this evening, Mr. Paylor is, because she has a celebration in her family tonight. So I will just be talking a little bit about them. We have the one that is basically just an approval and formal acceptance. I do approve the $1,000 that they're asking for. Here it's, minimal expense, but certainly money worthwhile. Do you want to do each one separately? Probably.
Yeah, let's just do that. Are there any? Yeah, if there aren't any questions, can I have a motion to approve the Western Board of Education accept the Hurlbut Elementary School PTO donation of $1,000 for recess equipment?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I second.
I second.
Okay, great. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Item number 7E, approval of Hurlbut Elementary School PTO donation to upgrade the LRC makerspace. This donation has a value up to $30,000.
Yes, and I have to apologize because Sharon Rodko, our library media specialist, actually presented to the PTO, and I meant to include the presentation as one of the attachments to this board meeting. But I guess I would say, there is a room off of the LLC that traditionally looks like, for lack of a better word, like counters and had certain kind of old-fashioned computers. It was not the best way of space. And what we want to do is we want to make that space very similar to and align looking at our K-12 program. The intermediate school has a beautiful makerspace, and the PTO wishes to donate money to mirror that. Patty, perhaps you could elaborate a little bit on the space that you have at the intermediate school that's kind of going to mirror what they're going to do at Hurlbut. Thank you.
Yep. So we did that a couple of years ago when we were thinking what to do with our computer space. We didn't want to have that anymore. So we really turned it into a real maker tech and a maker space area where there's lots of things to build and to put together for, oh my goodness, for any kind of coding and computer use and maker tech and creativity. They're all sort of lumped together. There's tables that move around and fix together and stools and adjust up and down. And so it's a wonderful creative space for kids to to do a variety of things, creative as well as technology. So,
And Tina, weren't you at the presentation that was
Yeah.
also presented? If you can elaborate a little.
Yeah, there's a request. Part of the request includes a large amount of storage space for the equipment. In the makerspace environment, you've got a lot of hands-on equipment for kids to use robots and circuitry and different aspects of coding, like Patty mentioned. But it also provides opportunities for kids to leave their projects up too. So if they need more than one period of time to work on and design their projects, they can leave them there and then they can come back at another time versus having to decompose, like, break them down and then rebuild them back up. So part of that room that Lisa mentioned off of the LRC, the Library Media Center, excuse me, includes storage space for all that equipment, as well as the tables that break apart into small groups and seating area as well for small groups and a large group conversation for teaching. It's really quite awesome. I want to go in there and play.
Other questions?
Just real quick, I think it's awesome. Do we need to think about budgeting for any kind of maintenance supplies? Is this donation something that we want to make sure
Yeah,
is in
great.
working order for perpetuity?
Yeah, we part of that was my question too before Laura presented it as well. It does provide, she already communicated with Mike Del Mastro and some of the cabinetry that needed to be removed out of that room before new cabinetry comes in and storage comes in. So it will likely be a like a phased in kind of development of that room, because Mike will need time in the summer to take some of the current storage that's in there out before the new furniture comes in. So it won't happen in one short period of time. It will likely happen some now, and then Mike needs to do some of the work over the summer before the next phase of storage comes in. Thank you. Good question.
Anyone else? Can I have a motion to approve the Weston Board of Education accept the Hurlbut PTO donation of 30,000 of a value up to $30,000 to upgrade the LRC makerspace?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second
Okay, great. All those in favor, please say aye.
it. Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Lisa, district upgrades, updates that can.
Yes, thank you. Before we continue, if you're okay, it is getting a little bit late, and I
Yep.
would like to be able to excuse the principals and assistant principal, Mr. Paler. It was a very early morning this morning with the weather, so
Great.
thank
Thank you, everybody. Have a great holiday.
Superintendent's report. The thing that I would like to highlight here is specifically, you heard a lot about, the student-centric design and safety, security, different things. I think it might be well spent to talk specifically about, we did send a survey out to kind of capture the numbers of the preschool, the future preschool population, that was kind of also talked about at our special meeting on enrollment, and Dr. Henkel spearheaded that survey. So I thought it might be helpful, Tina, if you share the results. The idea was to survey not only district families, but also the families outside of the district within Weston, reaching out to preschools, things like that. So Dr. Henkel, can you give us an update on that, please?
Sure. We've had an increase of 42 households respond to the survey. Of those that responded, so that's a total of 228 households. We currently have for the entering school year for 2025, for those that will be entering kindergarten, we have a total of 95 entering kindergarten for next school year. And then we asked for 4 years of data, within their households over the next 4 years. Those numbers, if they are accurate, they do decline over the 4 years. So they go from 95 for next year, 69 for the following school year, 55 for the year after, and 46 for the year after that. So there's a 4-year, data entry, for lack of a better term, regarding the number of kindergartners that are coming in over the next 4 years. But next year being the largest number of 95 students.
So I want to stress that this is kind of the first time we've done this. So it's sort of one data point, if you will. I think it is good practice to keep doing this, frankly, on an annual basis. It provides us with additional information. But as we were surprised this past year of the influx, I think we just have to keep this in mind as we plan. And kindergarten registration is starting in January. Okay, right when we get back from school from the vacation, and we will be monitoring that very closely. Pretty much on a weekly basis, we get calls about the numbers from Ms. Cadis.
Questions for Lisa? Can we go back to the consent agenda, Lisa?
Oh, gosh, we skipped it. Sorry. Paul, sorry about that.
Thank you very much. Just kind of going over to we have 3 new hires, and I'll be kind of reviewing. We have 5 resignations. The first one, Joey Augusto, as Mr. Rios already kind of went over, he was our security specialist coming in from Bridgeport as retired officer. Robert Benway is a math teacher that we're bringing in from Hamden, and he actually goes by Manny Cordomaitis. He's coming in as a cafeteria aide. And he started here about a week ago. With our resignations, Bentley Callahan was at the high school, Dave Fiorini at the middle school as a paraeducator, James Fisher, a security specialist, Kevin Robinson, a cafeteria aide, and lastly, Lisa Valenzizi at Hess and WIS as our assistant director of pupil services.
Questions? Can I have a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented?
I so move.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Thank you, Peter. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Pupil Personnel Services and Special Education. Tracy?
Good evening, everybody. I just have a brief update for tonight. Our next parent meeting is this Wednesday, December 20th at 8:30 in the Weston Middle School Library. We are meeting in person. The topic of the meeting will be navigating the special education process from birth to 3 through post-secondary. I'm going to highlight some key features of special education programming and the various processes that happen within that, specifically highlighting supports and services available in Weston. The meeting will be recorded if families are unable to attend, and as always, we'll make it available on the district website. And then in terms of other updates, in January, we start our process of helping to begin to support student transitions to new buildings in the district. So students who are transitioning from Hess to WIS or WIS to the middle school, and also start planning, believe it or not, for extended school year. So that's my update for tonight.
Questions for Tracy? Thanks, Tracy. Phil, Finance and Operations.
Good evening, everyone. Before I get into the financial, I just want to provide 2 quick updates. With regards to the track project, the Board of Finance last week did approve an additional funding for the full track improvement at the high school, which will begin this summer. Other update, you may recently, a few days ago, we had a down service at the high school, at the middle school, which was caused by a break, so to speak, in a fiber optic line. Then DeVito is going to provide a quick update on that.
Okay, so just to go over just some of the infrastructure, our fiber is buried underground. It was installed in 1999. It goes from Town Hall into the field that separates Town Hall and Hurlbut, through the side of Hurlbut, all the way down School Road, and fiber lines drop off to each building as you get to it, ultimately culminating at the middle school. Monday night at 7:30, last Monday night at 7:30 p.m., the line was completely cut. So we had to spend a couple of days identifying exactly where that line was. We had to scour about 1,300 feet of wiring underground to eventually find that it had been chewed completely in half by a rodent So we did have that fiber line fixed, but moving forward, I did recommend that we have the fiber lines tested at all the buildings, just due to the age of the fiber, it being 25 years old and underground, just so we can verify the integrity of all the fiber and to see if there are any next steps that need to be taken to verify, to make sure that we have maximum uptime on the fiber.
Thank you, Dan. So for the update, as of November, we are trending, or we're showing a slight surplus. I just want to caution that there's still some variability within that, but we do anticipate that we'll end the year with a balanced budget. For reason as this, we did not and we do not have a budget for this cost. And at this time, we do not know the full cost. We're still waiting on an invoice from the company for the full cost of this. In addition to that, we do have some other items or some other object codes that are trending to be a little bit unfavorable. We will continue to monitor those, and we'll provide an update to this in upcoming months. Typically, we'll have a better sense in terms of where we will end the year at about the end of the third quarter. Just want to highlight for the period ended November, a few things. We are showing a favorability in our health insurance and our benefits line. We have some savings for health insurance and net health insurance, which is caused by a lower than anticipated census. In addition to that, we are seeing some additional revenue offsets for transportation. I want to say that we did under budget slightly for preschool tuition. So we'll have additional revenue related to that, $96,000. We do have increase non-resident tuition of approximately $54,000. And we have better than anticipated reimbursement from Medicaid. So all in all, we're trending favorable, and things as at this point in the year are trending as planned. Our dental claims for our internal services fund, those are trending within a 2-year average. And that is pretty much where we are at this point in the year.
Questions for Phil? Can I have?
See, I was just going to return back to the fiber cable, since we did discuss this in our meeting on Friday. So there's going to be a recommendation on upgrades, fixes, repairs coming from Phil, right?
Right. So as Dan mentioned, so the first step was to get the middle school back up and running. The next step, as Dan mentioned, we've discussed, is really to really have a test of the entire district and pretty much the state or the condition of the current of the lines. Am I saying that correctly, Dan?
Yes. So the fiber optics, you have one line, but you get 6 strands off the lines or 12 strands off the line. So we need to verify that even if we only have one line, but there may be 3 strands that work, or 4 strands that work, or 2 strands that work. So we need to get a full write-up and investigation as to how viable all of the fiber is long-term, and then based on the evaluation, what our next steps would be. Whether that's repairing, replacing, it all depends.
Can I jump in for a minute? My company is not interested in bidding to Weston. My company does this kind of work. So if Dan, you're going to send this out for bid, we have a lot of in-house expertise. I know emergency repairs are expensive, but we have quite a few vendors that we work with that will do the testing on a non-emergency rate. But yeah, mice do love Cat6 network wire and fiber. It is not unusual. We see it a lot. So yeah. So
and I do, and you bring up a great point, right? Mice. The fiber was underground, so because I know when I said rodent before, people got scared. It was a rodent underground outside of the building. So it wasn't a rat inside the building. It was a rat far away from the building that caused the cut. But yes, unfortunately, the technician said this tends to be this way based on the winter. When it gets cold, they'll find a conduit, They'll make it a home.
Dan, you know how to reach me. You and I talk all the time. So if you want any expertise, again, I'm not wanting or willing to sell you anything, just my expertise at no cost.
Thank you, David. I appreciate it.
Pretty good deal.
Yeah.
On behalf of the board, I'd like to thank you, David.
I agree. Here.
Dan, really quick question. Sorry, Steve. Just on a timeline for that, is there an estimated timeline by which we're going to evaluate and then make the necessary changes, et cetera?
So the evaluation is going to happen sooner rather than later. So once we had the company out, priority number one was fixing the fiber. I didn't want them to test the fiber while they were here because, like David said, then it would be considered an emergency analysis, and it doesn't need to be an emergency analysis for that. So I'm working with the company to have them over here over the next few weeks to have them properly do the testing, but on a normal hourly rate instead of it being an emergency.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I just didn't know if it were a couple weeks or a couple months. I want to make sure that I don't miss anything. We stay on track so that whatever needs to get done, we're aware of and we can approve.
Yeah, no, and it's going to be the next few weeks. I don't want to sit on this one. One fiber makes me concerned. So I want to make sure that we're in good shape moving forward. So sooner rather than later, 100%.
Great, thanks.
Yep.
Other questions? May I have a motion to approve the November financial report for fiscal year 23-24 as presented?
Yeah, I moved to approve the November financial report for fiscal year 23-24.
Second?
Second.
Oh, great, thank you. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Let's go through the committee reports. Communications Committee.
We met, I think, as people know, we're trying to increase transparency and work within guardrails. So we're working with the Board of Ed attorney to figure out how to, kind of compromise in the middle. So we're making some progress on in that area.
Thank you, David. CABE.
No updates for CABE.
CES, David.
Just we had our legislative breakfast, I guess it was a week or so ago, which is always interesting. It's where the legislators who typically make decisions on our behalf and don't give us money to implement those decisions are there to defend their decisions. I did approach one of the legislators after the meeting. Don't worry, Lisa, I didn't embarrass anybody. But I did ask them for an unfunded mandate. How do they help districts like ours, which depends entirely on our residential base, to offset the costs? And her response to me was, and I quote, Lisa, waiting for it, "How much do you spend per student?" And I said, 26,000, give or take. And she said, "And you're asking for help." And I was like, well, where do you go with that? So anyway, that was the
I applaud your efforts in asking the question. I mean, you and I have talked.
Yeah, if you know nothing else about me, I'll ask the question just to get the answer out there on the record.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, but it's always insightful to learn how legislators make decisions on our behalf and then leave it to us to fund their decisions. So yeah.
Yeah. Welcome to Hartford.
Yes.
The EOC, Peter.
We covered it earlier, but in general, we do have a scheduled next meeting, and the two elements that you'll see in the next, we'll post an agenda as we did last time, and now that we have minute notes that the public can return to, we'll vote on those notes in the next meeting. So it's becoming more formalized.
Great. Finance and Operations, we had a meeting, but we've pretty much covered all of that this evening. Negotiations Committee, I don't believe there were any negotiations going on, Paul, that I'm aware of. Policy Committee, our meeting was postponed. And WEF?
WEF, they they're still kind of finalizing the numbers after the Wizards game. And in addition to that, they are getting ready to launch a new website, and that's largely focused on what it is that they're doing and helping to support their fundraising, which they just recently did their big mailer to the town of Weston. So everyone who's here and who is a citizen of Weston should have gotten a letter from WEF asking for support. It's their annual fundraiser. So that's what they're up to right now.
Terrific.
Jump in for a curriculum committee too. We had a good meeting, so I want to jump in and get a shout out. In curriculum meeting for December, we continued with the district-wide technology updates. We focused primarily on WIS. And then we did an overview of the K-12 social studies curriculum. There were some really great questions and very detailed dialogue about some of the things that we're doing in that curriculum. So it was a nice long meeting with lots of info. So if you're interested in what we're doing, definitely check it out.
Bernie, can we just also throw in there something that was important to me? I think Tina knows what I'm going to say. It was actually on our last regular Board of Ed meeting to be discussed at this Board of Ed meeting. There really is no discussion needed other than to say I was a proponent that we get some kind of Holocaust remembrance going at the middle school level. I'm happy to say, I believe for the first time, at least we believe the first time, there will be grade level appropriate what is it called? Assembly for
Guest
6th, 7th, and
speakers.
8th graders in the middle school. So we're definitely making progress on that. And there's still some work to be done. We talked about trying to get some Holocaust remembrance education into our lower grades as well. But we are definitely have made progress on that for this coming January.
Perfect. Thank you. And the next item on the agenda is the next scheduled meetings of the Board of Education. You'll see there are a number of them, most of them all related to the budget. And it takes us through much of January, as well as our normal monthly January meeting. Are there any questions on those?
I think it's important to note that the regular monthly January meeting is in person.
That's correct. Any pending agenda items for the next meeting? Okay, seeing none, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I move to adjourn the.
Peter, there's a lot easier way to do it.
I have it right here. I have it in front of me. Board book, the December 18th, 2023 Board of Education regular meeting at 8:43 p.m.
Terrific. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Have a great holiday.
All right.